And now, it's the Finding Your Spine podcast with host Chase Spears.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Finding Your Spine podcast, where we call men and women of moral principle to act like the truth matters in their lives. I've got a good buddy in studio today, Will Pope. Thanks for making the drive, man. You had a little bit of a ways to come this morning.
Well, I drove in from Topeka, not too far, but glad to be here, Chase. And yeah, we've known each other for a few years now. We're in the same PhD program, and I'm glad I could join you here on your podcast.
Yeah, I've been really excited about actually having you in since I started this, because a lot of people don't know the story of January 6th survivors. And I use that term very, very deliberately.
Mm-hmm.
You are one voice, one of many, and we'll talk about a lot more of them, but you have been put through, if I may say, sent to hell and back by the Department of Justice since January, really since February of 2021, and we're going to dig into that and how you came through it. But man, to see you on the other side of it with a smile on your face is just...
Winning feels good, yeah.
Yeah.
But we're not quite done yet. We have a few issues to resolve. But yeah, like Winston Churchill said, if you're going through hell, keep going. And it definitely felt like hell for 4 years. But we're in a better place now. We still have challenges, but yeah, been a long road here.
Yeah, but you have kept your head up throughout. And I'm just amazed at how unfazed you've been throughout. And so that's really why I wanted you here, because what you went through, a small fraction of it would make the overwhelming majority of the public, probably me even, say, it's too much. Like, I can't bear up on this. I've got to cut a deal. I've got to cry uncle. And you didn't. And not only that, you fought on your own, and that's such an inspiring part of your story. So, but I'm inadvertently giving a little bit of it away. We'll dig more into that as we go along. But before we jump in, I want to, as always, give a little bit of a biographical introduction to you. And I've got the notes here, but if I miss something, do feel free to interject and let me know. You're a doctoral candidate at Kansas State University studying leadership communication, which is where you and I met, actually, as co-doctoral students. Recently completed your qualifying examinations.
Correct. Yeah, I got through that, and now kind of beginning the ideation for the dissertation, and hopefully I'll have a proposal in the near future.
Man, whatever you're writing about, I rather imagine it's going to be pretty relevant, and I would look forward to reading it.
Well, it will be on January 6th. I'm just kind of figuring out kind of the parameters and the direction, the questions that I want to answer on that. But yeah, I figured, like, I've developed a knowledge of what it took to go through all that, and I want to make sure that we document that for history, because there really was a battle that went on for 4 years, and I think that'll get forgotten if we don't put it on paper. Yeah,
there definitely has to be a record of the abuses. We dare not forget.
Yep.
We dare not forget what we did to fellow Americans. You're a lover of teaching our nation's history to Americans. You got your start working with the National Park Service in places like Yellowstone and the Grand Canyon and even the LBJ Library, which...
Well, not the library. I worked at the LBJ Ranch.
Okay, the ranch. Sorry about that.
Yeah, where he lived. But it's about an hour away from the library. But, yeah, I worked for the National Park Service for a little bit, and you work in dynamic locations like that. It gives you unique perspectives on the world, and I guess that's a big part of what I took away from all that.
And then you went on to do some stuff with NASA as well.
Well, I worked at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama. They're affiliated with NASA. They're not actually NASA, but they have a NASA museum there. And then they also do a lot of educational programs. They've got the space camp there. They've got Aviation Challenge, kind of a military training for young people. But they also have adult education as well. But I was there for a little bit, yeah.
Oh, good deal. And then you also did some time as a tour guide at the state capitol there in Topeka.
Yeah, I believe I'm the only former January 6th defendant who is also a Capitol tour guide. But, yeah, I was a tour guide a couple different times. That lasted until they shut the Capitol down for renovation, the dome down, and then I came back in end of 2013, beginning of 2014, and help them reopen dome tours, and did that for a little bit. So
that a little bit of a side trail here. That dome tour is really, really stinking cool.
Yeah. Did you go climb out on the beams up there?
I've done it twice.
Yeah.
I've done it twice. Yeah. I don't think most people realize. I didn't realize. I think we're one of two state capitals in the nation that you can go up into the dome, if I remember right.
Well, I don't know how many are doing it right now. I think there have been a few over the years, but states are constantly changing that. And I believe you can actually get one at the U.S. Capitol as well, but you got to get like your congressman or whatever to give you permission to go on that. But yeah, it was a cool thing. I've probably been up there, 1,500 times or more.
Oof.
And
it's a way to get your steps in.
Yeah, it was a fun job. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, for anyone who's listening, if you ever drive through Topeka, it's definitely worth going and checking that out. I've taken my kids up there. It's a great time. Just the scale of it. And so you love history. You're involved with things that really kind of help capture and share the historical tradition of the nation. Mm-hmm. And then your life changed dramatically on January 6th.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just a turning point, and the most present reason we're here talking today, and what we'll dig into. You were in D.C. on that day. You approached the Capitol to see what was going on. Mm-hmm. You got, against your will, pushed inside the building.
Yeah. So, like my brother and I were planning to do a camping trip to various national parks on the East Coast. And we wanted to take in the president's speech. We thought that would be his kind of final rally that he ever did. And so we listened to the speech. We walked down to the Capitol. And when we got there, like, the lawn was full of people. It was a relatively calm moment in time. Now that I know, like, everything else that happened, like, there's some crazy stuff before we got there and after we got there. But, like, the West Lawn was pretty calm when we got there. But there were a lot of people, so we decided to walk around to the other side. And then at one point we saw people, like, coming out of the Senate carriage doors, and they had, now I know, entered the Capitol a couple minutes earlier through that first window breaking that you've probably seen the video of. And we had no clue what was going on, but, like, curiosity, I walked up there to the door and just kind of observing, trying to figure out, like, what in the world is going on here. And one of the people that had come through from the west side came back and tried to get back in. He tried to force his way through police initially, and then he came back around me and began like squat thrusting, like pushing me into the Capitol. So fortunately, I've got that on video. So I can be like, yeah, I actually did get pushed into the Capitol. I was entirely nonviolent. I didn't destroy anything, and the government still charged me with 30 years of federal charges. So,
yeah, it's just, in comparison to how I see them having handled other protesters, clearly two different schools of justice that were at play.
Yep.
But you were arrested in 2021, indicted on 30 years worth of federal charges. And then you took a really gutsy move. You defended yourself. Mm-hmm. You're not an attorney, but you defended yourself. You learned the law probably better than most who are involved with that, or at least at a commensurate level. Gave the government prosecutors what for at every turn, and essentially came out with the very last charge being dropped by President Trump after he came back into office. Mm-hmm. And we even fishing out kind of your biography here, before January 6th, you were a professor. You taught at Kansas State University as well as Fort Hays State University.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was a GTA at K-State, and I was an adjunct professor at Fort Hays. And unfortunately, a lot of people like to cancel J6ers from society, and so I got let go from both places after that.
But you're back at school now, finishing up the PhD, which is where we initially met and connected, mm-hmm. and commiserated on research topics a little bit. And,
yeah.
And beyond that, you're a tireless voice for those who have really faced a good hard railroading by the Department of Justice under the previous administration. You're not holding back. You're documenting this. You're telling these stories, and trying to help set the record straight against what was just a tremendous wave of coverage of that just made anyone who was in D.C. that day look like, traitors, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, which is it was definitely a tough thing to go through, especially at first, because like I'm a proud American, I'm a loyal American, and then all of a sudden they're labeling anyone who is anywhere near there to be a traitor to the country, which is not what I am at all. And that made me mad. Obviously, when I was charged, you get that indictment that says U.S. v. William Pope, and that's a pretty heavy thing to have come down on you, like the United States of America versus William Pope. And that's a big battle to fight right there.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, I mean, I fought it for 4 years, and fortunately, it came out relatively well, but people are still picking up the pieces, and a lot of people don't realize that, just because the legal battle might be over doesn't mean our lives were back to where they were before all that happened. And beyond that, we continue to be defamed by the lies that were told for all those years. And so just pushing against that false narrative is a challenge that we're going through right now.
Yeah, well, I know you're continuing to push. I know you're going to continue to
I will.
push.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to let this.
I won't shut up.
I don't think you're going to let this pass quietly into the night.
No.
Which should not be done. So, before we dig into that day and the whole changing of trajectory of kind of the narrative of this season of your life, let's talk about yourself a little bit. Who was Will Pope before this man? At least when I got to know you, this man who loves America and who is trying to really shine a light on the rule of law and respect for understanding constitutional tradition and American history, which is something that we both share a great love and great passion for, which is kind of why I gravitated to wanting to know you early in the program, kind of kindred spirits in that regard. Let's help the listener know you a little bit more.
Well, at the time, so 2019, 2020, 2019, I was actually running for city council in Topeka, which is when I first became more politically involved. I'd volunteered for a congressional campaign the year before, and that kind of got me into it. But I ran in a very difficult district, and the demographics are not good for what I ran on. But I outperformed what they thought was even possible. So, but that left me pretty tired from all that, and I just kind of wanted to tune out from politics in 2020. Of course, then we had the pandemic coming down, and I remember in our PhD program at the time there being very, intense dialogue in classes, especially since a lot of our colleagues, our fellow students in the program, kind of share. Many of them come from like a Marxist ideology, very critical theory. And, if you're not in that, there was kind of this mindset that those who didn't share that needed to be ostracized. So, I tried to be, a good student, but also share my belief that, you need to be an independent thinker. You need to be able to, challenge ideas, like this diversity of ideas. That's where I come from. Just prior to January 6th, I was planning out what I was going to do my dissertation on. And I had planned to do it on community journalism in Kansas because I was running a Kansas News website at the time, and I was planning to make that the thrust of it. And in fact, part of the reason I went to Washington was because I wanted to cover the events of that day from a Kansas perspective. Now, I had no clue it was going to unfold like it did, but I just wanted to kind of view it through the lens of me as a Kansan and convey like how is what is going on here relevant to Kansans. And unfortunately, I never got to write that article because right after it, the DOJ began threatening on TV, like we're going to round up everybody, which it was a very Orwellian thing to go through. So, yeah, my life was very much academic at the time, and I was teaching at the time. And then immediately after, like my entire life collapsed. Like anything I was involved in, I was very involved in the community, and just everything. Not only getting fired from my job, but classes changed. The university didn't want me to sit in my classes that spring with other students, and so I kind of was doing it on my own, independent study with the teacher. And it was just a really weird Orwellian thing, but the entire nation was coming down saying, these people who were at the Capitol need to be banned from society, shunned from society, treated like insurrectionists. And it was a weird time. And you had COVID going on. You had a lot of pressure, just really kind of a crackdown on our constitutional rights going on here in America during that time. And I don't know if it was just the lockdowns or whatever, but there was a weird mindset in our country and almost like a lynch mob mentality. And January 6th became the biggest story of what would become the next 4 years. And even now it's a pretty big deal. And that coming down all at once pretty much crushed any support that people who were there had. Like, I got banned permanently from Facebook and Instagram. A lot of people got debanked. I got banned from PayPal. It just, different things were collapsing in my life almost day by day and week by week. So that first year was pretty tough. And then eventually I began to fight back. But the first year was just a very hard transition from the life that I had to now I've been destroyed and I have to rebuild.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to imagine, we were in school at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And for a while I had noticed, okay, I'm not seeing well in classes. And I had no idea that they were wanting you to sit out, that they were doing it really kind of independent study for you. I had no idea. I thought, okay, well, maybe in order to focus on
Mm-hmm.
whatever legal stuff, maybe he's temporarily suspended the program or something. I had no idea.
No, yeah, I was never suspended. I think maybe they wanted to get rid of me at a certain point, but I wouldn't go. But yeah, there were a couple students that we had in our program who would make a big deal about me being there and they need a safe space or whatever. And my ideas really aren't that controversial. When it comes down to it, I'm a pretty mellow and moderate guy in many ways, although I may be more conservative on a few positions, but I believe that everybody should have the opportunity to have freedom of speech, right? You can't silence voices that disagree with your own. And really, the next 4 years became me becoming maybe more of a dissident and pushing back for those rights than I was even before that, just because the crushing weight of it all was coming down so much. But in K-State too, in Topeka we have the Brown v. Board of Education National Historic Site for the national parks, and that is the only national park site to recognize the Supreme Court ruling, was that kids should not be divided in schools based on race, right? Separate is not equal. And yet at K-State, we were getting these wildcat dialogues where, dialogues on diversity, and if people didn't feel comfortable being at a table with a white person, they were going to segregate it into an all-black table and an all-white table to have these dialogues. And it was almost like we were regressing from the decades in America where we fought to bring people together and to diversify ideas and to try to be inclusive of all society. And in the name of inclusion, they were, again, segregating. So it was a weird time, but hopefully we're beginning to come around on that.
I think a lot more people's eyes are being opened, not only to this, but to a wider span of things that, frankly, we have been just so misled over the last few years. And if you're only paying attention to one of the handful of 3-letter or 5-letter news agencies that you download from cable, your thinking is going to be very skewed. And I find people who draw their news solely from a CNN or Washington Post, it's a lot more difficult to try to help them understand, well, it's a wider story than what you're being told. There is an agenda-driven purpose.
Yeah. And, I had made a habit years ago of trying to get every viewpoint of the whatever current issue of the day would be. So every morning I'd check out the CNN webpage, the Fox News webpage, and then maybe Real Clear Politics, because they'll have a list of news articles from differing viewpoints.
Yeah,
and I try to get those different perspectives just to see the angle that different people would approach it from. And so I think by the time I got to January 6th and what followed, I'd already trained my brain to look at the world from different perspectives. But even then, what followed over the next 4 years, I had to really, hone my ability to test information, what is real and what is not real, and go down to the source level to find as close as I can to the truth. And that is a challenge, and people really need to think critically as they consume media today.
They do. So, we talked about this a little bit in the introduction, but you're there on January 6th. You figure this is going to be kind of the last opportunity to hear from Donald Trump while he's still president. You walk down to the Capitol. You see things are clearly very unusual. You're curious. You walk up just to try to get a feel for what in the world's going on. You get pushed inside the building. Then you can't get out. The police have closed the doors.
Yeah, it was kind of a weird situation to even get to that point, because a lot of the people on the east side were up on the steps, and my brother and I, we just kind of wanted to avoid the crowd. And so we were hanging out in the courtyard there, and then we saw, protesters coming out from under the east steps. And then we went in up there to check it out and ended up getting pushed in. And then I tried to get out immediately, and it just became chaotic at the door. And John Sullivan, the one Antifa guy, he was actually in that area filming at the time. He captured part of it, depending on where his camera was pointed. But it became very chaotic, and he was yelling at police, making it more chaotic. And then at one point, the police went from trying to let people out to actually shutting the doors, because we were kind of getting a logjam there. So yeah, we got locked in the building, and then we spent about 20 minutes in there, and eventually came out the memorial doors. But 20 minutes and then 4 years of your life to fight back against the allegations. So
yeah, so 20 minutes, finally found your way out. Didn't hurt anyone.
Nope.
Didn't assault anyone. Probably didn't even give anyone dirty looks.
Didn't
break anything.
No. I wasn't even charged with assault. I wasn't charged with destroying property, so I don't even have those allegations. But even without that, the big one they threw at me was the 20-year felony charge of obstruction of an official proceeding, which had never been used in that context before. It was created when Enron had destroyed documents, and they were looking into what happened, and Enron tried to basically destroy the evidence of what they did. And so Congress created this 20-year felony back in 2002. And I had that hanging over my head for nearly 4 years until the Supreme Court threw it out in June of last year. But back in 2021, the federal government tried to get me to plead to that charge with a range of 41 to 51 months in prison. And I refused to do it because, one, I didn't believe I was guilty of it. I thought it was a bogus charge. And, I thought the prosecution in general was over the top, and I had to fight back. So I didn't take the plea to the bogus charge, and eventually that got thrown out, and I beat a couple others. And then finally, President Trump dropped the remaining charges.
So J6 happens. You're in the building. You're out of the building. And then there's this month gap. I know in February you had quite a force show up to your home. But what was that intervening month? That had to be eerie, because at that point in time we have lawmakers, beating their chests about worst attack in American history. And I'm like, okay, so we're surpassing 9/11, Pearl Harbor, Antietam during the Civil War.
Yeah, I mean, the rhetoric was over the top, and unfortunately, it was so loud. At that point, you couldn't even push back on it, and I just kind of had to tune out from news, and like I turned off Facebook. I couldn't, like, it was too much, and so you can't let that get in your head. But probably just about a couple weeks after, I got a call from the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force here in Kansas. And, they wanted to talk to me. I said, hey, I need to talk to an attorney first. And they said they were getting pressure from Washington to round as many people up before the inauguration as possible. So I got that call probably, 3 or 4 days before the inauguration. So I got an attorney and told him, hey, they're wanting to talk with me. And I scheduled a meeting to meet with the attorney. Well, apparently he had scheduled for them to just show up and interview me before we even talked, because 5 minutes after I showed up, the FBI JTTF was there, and they wanted to chat. And in retrospect, not a good idea to talk to him at all. It didn't end up really hurting me too much, because really, I stuck to what I believed in and told them the truth. There may be a couple things that they got wrong on their 302 that they documented it with, but overall, nothing really, I thought, hurt me. But they tried to corner me at one point, didn't you try to push police at the door or whatever? And I said, no, that never happened. But what they were trying to do is get a confession, and before I'd even seen the video or anything. But in my memory, no, that never happened. I never tried to be violent at all. And eventually I did get access to the video about a year and a half later, and my memory was correct on that. So, but yeah, in the intervening time, after that meeting, they told me, if we do bring charges, we'll let you self-report. And that was a lie, because on February 12th, they showed up to my house, called me out of the house. It was freezing cold at the time. And they did it on a Friday when a magistrate judge was not available for a hearing, a release hearing. And so I had to spend 5 days in jail because it was a President's Day weekend. So they did that intentionally. And they also did that on a Friday when she wasn't available, so they could take me to the county jail and get a public mugshot taken. So, these are kind of just to convey the dirty tactics that they were using against anyone related to January 6th. But a lot of people had it way worse than me. A lot of people had doors kicked down, lasers pointed at kids. Just terrible, terrible things that were going on. Windows broken.
And you told me it was 15 to 20 officers showed up.
I didn't get an exact count when I was there, but yeah, it was several. A lot of them were TPD, Topeka Police Department.
Okay.
I think they had one FBI guy there, and then the JTTF guys that I had interviewed with before. And so the fact that the TPD were there was interesting, because they wear body cams whenever they make an arrest or serve a warrant. But those were never produced to me in discovery. And so this became relevant in my case later on. I requested those body cams in 2023, sometime in 2023, I think it was September, October. And then the government never responded to my request for that discovery. And then when I requested it again in 2024, last year, they were on a 3-year retention schedule. So they let these body cams be erased from their system so they wouldn't have to produce them to me. But yeah, there were a lot of different shenanigans that the FBI pulled in my case, and which is why I continue to speak out. We need accountability for agencies that were weaponized against the American people. And they did so at a level that has never happened in our country before, and we got to make sure that it never happens again. It really is a threat to freedom if we have this radical government extremism taking over these agencies, this mindset of radical government extremism and suppressing the people. And we, the people, are really what the government is. We are the ones who choose the ideas and the direction for our country. And the bureaucrats, though, have come to view the people in recent years as the enemy, and they're looking at us as they once looked at, terrorists in the Middle East or whatever. So we really have to push back on that idea so that America doesn't go to a point of existential crisis.
Well, I think the fact that they deliberately made sure that body cam footage wasn't available is an indicator they knew this was wrong to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, they made a couple mistakes during my arrest, which I was going to make an issue of in my case. But, I mean, there were a lot of other shenanigans that they pulled. Like, it was a constant battle to try to get discovery the entire time. And I had to file numerous motions for discovery. I ended up winning quite a few of them. But it was a battle. It was like you think of playing chess, but this was like a strategic battle for 4 years. And, I chose to represent myself, which meant I had to learn the law on the fly, learn the strategy, the tactics, and kind of go with my gut a little bit too and my own expertise to keep them on their feet. But it was, it was an impossible mission at every point along the way, but I ended up winning. So it just, up until the end, it was like no possible chance that you survive that type of thing. But the entire weight of the federal government coming down on you, that's pretty heavy.
Yeah, that's enough to crush most people.
Yeah, and everybody responds to it differently, and I think it depends on your life circumstance a little bit. We had over 1,500 defendants arrested for January 6th. All of their cases are different. The facts are different. But all the people are different too. And how they respond to that pressure is different. And, a few of them might have had other things going on in life and it just became too much. Some of them despaired and took their own lives. Many chose to take a plea. Some chose to fight. And some chose to take a plea because they had children or a wife and they had to think about their family. And in a way, I wasn't married. I didn't have any kids. And so in a way, me being in that situation allowed me to fight in a way that other people might not have. And I've spoken with many other defendants who do have families, and they wish they would have been able to fight, but it was their kids that made them take the plea. They had to, be there for their family. But you think of the enormous amount of pressure the government brought down on people. It just to force them into a bad plea deal. This should never happen again.
It shouldn't. I want to talk. I'm going to insert myself a little bit into this here. You and I have already talked about this, and we're good. But I think it's right to get this on the record, and it's a part of the story, if not for you, for me, about that mugshot. I'll never forget that day in February. I'm at home. I'm still on active duty in the Army at this point in time. I get this email from an Associated Press reporter asking if I would do an interview about a student that I'm in K-State with named Will Pope. And I'm like, I wonder, this seems unusual. I work in media. I'm an Army PAO. Yeah. I'm used to doing interviews. I'm used to hearing from different reporters. I've never had the AP reach out to me before. That was a new one.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'm curious. And so I was scrolling down the email and I see January 6th. I'm like, well, now I'm even more curious. Yeah. And so I'm like, I'm going to do a quick Google search and find out. And then your mugshot was there. And I thought, wow, they got that up quick. And, this is a point in time of deep shame for me. And I know we've talked. I know we're good. Still bothers me that Lloyd Austin has just come in to take the role of Secretary of Defense. And his first action is there's no, hey, team, it's great to be back in the Army. He had retired as a 4-star general a few years before. There's no, hey, guys, it's great to be back. It's great to lead the Defense Department. It's great to soldier again. No, none of that. It's the military is full of extremists, and I'm here to root them out, essentially. paraphrasing. And I thought, well, that's interesting because that apparently extremist military promoted you to 4-star general and gave you a very long, lucrative career that sent him right into a millionaire's job in the defense industry afterwards, and has now placed you back at its head, this extremist organization. And the intensity with which they were like looking inwardly to the military. They were trying to use January 6 as an excuse. Oh, there were some veterans there, so the military's full of extremists and we have to get them out. I mean, there was a witch hunt in the ranks. And I got to tell you, I had a moment of weakness. I had a moment of terror. I thought, man, like if my name gets put into this, now I'm under investigation now. And I was already kind of on the naughty list because of my writing. And the fact that I would share with superior PAOs things that I thought needed to be revitalized in the field. And I kind of had a fight or flight moment of weakness. Like, what do I do? And to my shame, to my discredit, like I went disconnected from you on my social channels, and I kind of went into hiding. And that bothered me for a long time. And then last year, we reconnected, and I saw how, like, you were just charging through. You're just charging through. And I was like, this dude has not let this get him down. And
you got to fight back.
Yeah. And so I say all that to say, I talk a lot about building courage and having spine in this. And that has not always been something that I have done well.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of moments of weakness, and our relationship was probably one of the worst. But you need not let that define you. And
you're a good guy, Chase. I don't want you to be too hard on yourself, but that you're a good guy, and yet the amount of pressure that came down on you is the pressure that came down on a lot of people. And I mean, that again, though, was one of the things that me and other defendants were facing early on, like almost on a daily basis. It would be like another friend or whatever who would seem to like disconnect. And I do remember like seeing, oh, Chase is he's not my connection on LinkedIn anymore, but we've reconnected now.
I still feel bad.
I'm not holding that against you. Like, again, the narrative was overwhelmingly negative, and it was told by one side. And at that point, there was no pushback, and we hadn't, put out a defense yet. Like the allegations were out there in spades, but we hadn't, put back the exculpatory information, right? But yeah, I mean, that goes to convey just how much pressure it was under. And even now, like I'm treated like I'm a radioactive individual just because my name is associated with January 6th. And there are a lot of companies or individuals out there who don't want to hire people like me, even though I've done this thing where I've represented myself and, against all odds, I beat like more than a dozen federal attorneys, right? I mean, to me, that was like the biggest, most challenging thing I've ever done. And yet it even now it's hard to find work, and it's hard to be accepted. And I'm still banned from Facebook and Instagram and things like that. So, I don't hold it against you because I know that narrative, and you were only getting one side of it at the time. And obviously your role in the military, that kind of compounded it, I'm sure. And the interesting thing is the military actually paid to have universities do studies on the extremism of J6ers. And so they would have these people, and many of them are connected to a group called the Sedition Hunters, who would go in and do like this very kind of left-wing research into what individuals were involved. And they would paint us in the worst possible light. And the military funded that, like big grants to universities to do that. And then the funny thing is, though, there were active duty military who were at the Capitol on January 6th. A few of them have been charged. You had like 3 Marines who were in the rotunda about the time I was there. And, they get promoted at NSA there at Fort Meade. So you kind of got to wonder, like, why is the military like treating it differently there? But I understand, and I know you feel bad about it, but I've told you like all is forgiven, and my goal is to bring better information to people who may not have gotten it before. And I did have to fight back. After about a year of kind of keeping my head low and taking the hits, I said the only way out is to be unconventional and to fight back. And when you get that offer for a plea deal of 41 to 51 months and you're like, that's not the out, I've got to fight back. And you kind of enter a mindset of self-sacrifice, where even if I don't win, like my goal was to make my arrest as painful as possible for the federal government.
I think you accomplished that.
Yeah, and I still try to do that here and there, but we just in America, we're governed by the people, and if government becomes too oppressive, the people have to push back, and I did so in a legal way through our court system. We can do through the electoral process. I'm not advocating for like pushing back in a physical sense, like an armed uprising. I'm completely against that type of thing. Like, we have to push back legally, and that takes a lot more work, but we have to be able to influence change through the systems that we have set up. And I believe in the Constitution, and I believe we can make it work, even though it might have gotten thrown off track a little bit how it was being implemented, right? Our government got astray, but we have to bring back that philosophy that government is about we the people. And again, it was like going through hell, but you got to fight back. You got to push back.
Yeah, you had, a total of 8 charges?
Yeah, I had 8.
At you?
2 felonies, 6 misdemeanors. Again, I beat 2 of them pre-trial by filing a motion for a bill of particulars. The government was like, well, we don't actually have details on how he violated those 2 statutes, and so those got dropped.
Hang on, they charged you with things they had to acknowledge they had nothing to charge you with?
Well, they didn't want to acknowledge it outright, but I filed a motion for a bill of particulars, and under the Constitution, you have a right to be informed about the nature of the accusations being brought against you. And the accusation they made was vague to a point where I had no clue, like what did I actually do that violated that statute that you're charging me with? They said I blocked ingress and egress. There were a couple that were related to that. And the judge agreed. I said, you need to give him particulars on these 3 charges. One of them they ended up giving me more particulars on. 2 of them they didn't want to give particulars on because there was nothing that I had done that had blocked anyone from entering or exiting any part of the building. And the government knew that, and they knew that I had it on video that there's no way that I'd blocked anyone, and so they were pretty much forced to drop those 2. And then the third one that they had to provide particulars on, there's a parading charge. Like, what did I do that constituted parading in the Capitol building? And they came back and they said that me carrying a United States flag while holding a viewpoint for or against something constituted criminal parading. So essentially, having a point of view and carrying the American flag in the Capitol is a crime, according to the federal government. And that was bogus, and I pushed back on that quite a bit. And how can carrying an American flag be a federal crime?
So if I ever take a tour of the Capitol, I need to leave my little pocket flag at home? Is that
apparently? You think to any State of the Union though, and you have people waving flags, chanting USA, and I didn't do anything more than that. And yet they charged me with criminal parading.
Under that, every lawmaker who has a flag in their lapel.
Yeah, good point.
Wow. They're just making stuff up.
Well, the statute for the lawmakers is a little bit different, sidebar, but they exempt anyone who is an elected congressman from the criminal parading statute.
Okay,
so,
that's how we have all these Ukraine flags in the House.
Yeah. They can do whatever they want.
And during all of this, something that I didn't realize until you beat the last charge and you put this up on X and you wrote really well about it, and it blew my mind, is that you were restricted to the Judicial District of Kansas.
Correct.
Which is something I had never heard of. I thought this sounds very 1860s to me.
Yeah, we think of America in terms of states usually, but we have different judicial districts. And The Judicial District of Kansas pretty much encompasses the state of Kansas and a little bit of Kansas City area. Some states will have like multiple districts, but as far as like pretrial conditions, I could not travel outside the state of Kansas without notifying pretrial services that I would be leaving, and I had to give them 2 days notice if I went to like Nebraska or Colorado. So for 4 years, I had to call in every week to pretrial services to notify them, just check in. And any time I traveled out of state, I had to notify them. I was banned from going to Washington, D.C. except for court, or I had to get judicial approval, which I did get actually 3 times during my case, but for unique things. But it was very, again, like I had no criminal record, and yet I was being constrained on my travel and what I could do with my life.
So what was it
Excuse me.
that made you decide to go on your own as legal counsel? The what you're describing here in terms of the motions you were filing and to know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're up against. I hesitate to say the word best and brightest when it comes to some DOJ attorneys, but you're up against people who are certainly credentialed and you would think have experience enough to know how the law works if they're going to be prosecuting federal cases. And you're not an attorney. As far as I know, you didn't go to law school.
No.
You've never sat for the bar.
No.
Never practiced in a court before. Maybe, like my legal experiences, I watched Matlock,
I have watched Matlock a little bit, yeah.
And yet you took this on. What was behind that?
That was a very big decision. I didn't make it lightly. Again, the government, they have every advantage in that situation, whether you have an attorney or not. So they have the resources. They have, the courts generally give them deference on different things. And they're bringing the charges, and you're in a hostile venue. So, I had essentially everything stacked against me, but I knew that I had to be able to fight my case in an unconventional way. And I'm very much a strategic thinker. And the first 2 appointed counsels that I had, they either wouldn't communicate with me. One guy didn't even know how to use the computer. And, they had other cases they were dealing with. They didn't have the time to give my case what it needed. During the first year and a half, I had begun really researching the video, video recordings made on January 6th at the Capitol, near the Capitol. And I developed kind of an expertise of what had happened that day. And I got to the point where, there's some days I'd do 16 hours of video review, just trying to cram as much information as I could. And so I had one thing that an attorney didn't have. I had a knowledge of the facts of what actually happened that day and how the different pieces connected together. And I thought that gave me an advantage. But that was still a very difficult decision to make because I didn't have, I had never written a motion. I didn't have expertise on legal process, how any of that worked. So I didn't make that lightly, but ultimately I felt like that was the only strategic move that might give me an opportunity to fight back in the way that I wanted to fight back. But yeah, it did end up, I fought a very unconventional case, and I pursued some legal theories that other attorneys weren't pursuing. But over time, I think I gained the respect both of the defense attorneys and my judge. And, there would even be the judge did require me to have a standby counsel in case I ever changed my mind. That way she could fill in at a moment's notice. But she would be working some other case, and the prosecutor would be like, "Oh, you're Pope's standby counsel," I was apparently getting a reputation within the DOJ as well because I was giving them a bit of hell. But it was definitely a fight, and probably the first year or so I was kind of getting my feel for it, how do I write a motion, what do I need to approach, and then the final year was just a battle. There was one week I forget how many pages. One day I turned in 100 pages worth of motions, and it was a lot of work. And I thought I was going to have trial in July last year, and then the Supreme Court case came down, and the government wanted to continue to figure out how they were going to apply that.
Can you explain for the listeners the significance of that Supreme Court decision?
Yeah, so again, I had that 20-year felony obstruction charge, and that was the main charge, 20 of the 30 years that I was facing. And the Supreme Court, in the case of Joseph Fisher versus United States, he was appealing that charge, like that it shouldn't have been applicable to his conduct. And the Supreme Court actually, they agreed with him in a 6-3 ruling. And one of the liberal justices, Brown, came down and agreed with 5 of the conservatives. And their ruling was like, hey, this shouldn't be applied to just any dissent out there, right, or any protest out there. So eventually when that got applied to my case, that threw out the charge, but the government wanted to figure out how they were going to apply that ruling, just because they wrote it in a way that only applied to the Fisher case, but then they had to extrapolate kind of the legal theory to everybody else's case, and people had different facts, right? So that delayed my first trial date that I had, which would have been July of 2024. And then I had another one that would have been in December of 2024. Right after Thanksgiving, I would have been on trial. But because President Trump won the election, my judge noted in another case that he was open to continuing proceedings until after the inauguration for the sake of judicial economy, just because Trump had conveyed that he was going to be dropping cases or issuing pardons or whatever. And so because my judge implied that, I filed a motion to continue my case based on that argument that it was for judicial economy, and I made a lot of other arguments as well. The government pushed back on it very strongly. They did not want to continue, but ultimately the judge agreed with me. And that status hearing, the face that my prosecutor made, it just that'll be burned in my mind forever.
I chef's kiss moments.
Yeah, I appreciated that. She was not happy, and that made me happy. But anyway, yeah, I got continued until after the inauguration, and then, of course, on Inauguration Day, President Trump issued an executive order, and it was a 3-part order. One part was, anyone who had been convicted of a crime, they're going to get a pardon. And then there were a few individuals who they wanted to look at their cases more, and so they just gave them a commutation, which let them out of prison rather than a full pardon. And some of them have been pardoned since then, and others I think they're still looking at. And then the other part was people who hadn't been to trial, who hadn't been convicted, and that would be me. And he ordered the DOJ to drop those cases. So I was never convicted of any crime. I never received a pardon. I won my case after 4 years of fighting against all odds. I never thought I would make it that far, especially back in 21, 22. But yeah, kind of surreal for it to be over. And we do have a few things that we need to wrap up on as far as we want the truth of what happened that day. But yeah, it was the legal battle is over. They can never bring those charges again.
Do you ever have any thoughts about, and I don't want to put you on the spot. If you don't want to talk about this, it's fine, but I have thoughts about it. What should happen to those prosecutors who are so clearly bent on an agenda over justice? I mean, you mentioned earlier that the pressure from Washington was not, hey, find the people who committed criminal acts, and we know there were some, and bring the law to bear appropriately, but that it was, no, we need to round up as many people as possible. And there were a lot of people who were compliant with that.
Yeah, and you think back to World War II and Nazi Germany, and you think of all the Germans who were just following the orders to put people on cattle cars or do whatever. And in America, we've had a tradition hey, that should be our warning. We should never let that happen in America. And yet, January 6th, it was happening. They were coming after people who had peacefully exercised First Amendment rights, And it was kind of an Orwellian thing, rounding them up by the hundreds. But, to put me on the spot on that, I don't know. There were definitely prosecutors who pulled a lot of dirty tricks. In my case, I could name many. Eventually, I'll probably write a book about it in detail, like everything that happened. But I think certainly the ones where they took people to trial and they put on video evidence that was not factual to get a conviction, like there should be some repercussions for that. Like, I'll give you an example. The Oath Keepers trial, and the Oath Keepers was one of the seditious conspiracy trials. The government essentially pieced together video from different times to make it look like they were at a certain spot watching people pull police away from the door when they were actually down on the steps singing the national anthem. Or at one point they were inside the Capitol and they were blocking people from getting to Officer Harry Dunn, right? And we know this now from piecing together different video, but the government had Dunn testify, and then they had another agent for the Capitol Police testify, Agent Lazarus testify that they were there and that the Oath Keepers were trying to come after them. Well, by piecing together CCTV, we know that Lazarus was never in that area at that time. He was actually down in the basement at that time. But the government didn't give the video to the defense to be able to push back on that. And that was an area where there was no CCTV, so you had to piece it together from public video. So they tried to make up a narrative that was completely fake. And they convicted people on narratives like that, and that happened over and over and over again. So yeah, there should be accountability for that, and there should be accountability for the FBI agents who are putting that evidence together, because they should know better. Like, we're not talking about just they got it wrong. They made up narratives that were completely wrong intentionally, and they did it to put out a broader public narrative that they wanted of an insurrection, right? And yeah, there should be accountability for that, and hopefully there will be. We haven't seen enough yet, but having kind of gone through the battle firsthand, I'm going to keep pushing for accountability. And it may not be that there may be people in the DOJ or FBI who, they didn't really have much to do with it. Right? I'm not coming after them, but if there were people that were intentionally pulling dirty shenanigans, then yeah, why do we want them working in a place of authority when they've violated the American public trust already?
Yeah, if you've proven yourself unworthy of that trust, that's disqualifying.
I would think, yeah.
Yeah, I would, I would personally love to see every prosecutor who knowingly went with a lie. I'd love to see every one of them disbarred, and that's just the beginning. In representing yourself, you got a lot of firsts done. Like, you were the first J6 defendant to be allowed to view the closed circuit television recordings. You were the first to publicly identify undercover police and FBI who were in the crowd, part of helping to stir this thing up. You were the first person in history, I believe, to take a court-ordered tour of the U.S. Capitol. That had to be
yeah, my prosecutors didn't like that one either, but essentially the government had made evidentiary tours available to defense counsel. That way they can kind of retrace where their client had been in the Capitol that day. And me representing myself, I argued that I needed to take that tour as well, because there were a couple blind spots in the CCTV, and I needed to figure out exactly what happened in each location, and then also take a few notes on different areas. But the government did not want that to happen. My judge agreed that I had a right to be there, just as the defense attorneys had been there. So after I won that motion, though, they kept pushing back. They wanted the judge to reconsider, and then they kind of drug their feet on finding a date. And I said, hey, how can I go to trial if I haven't had my opportunity to examine the evidence? And so the judge did say, hey, at one point, you guys need to report back every week on the status of, like, whether you have a tour date arranged yet. And what it came down to, like, and the final update that the government gave, like, they had to get permission from both houses of Congress for me to get a tour date of the Capitol. And I took it October 20th, 2024, last year. And the entire prosecution team and 3 FBI agents, Capitol Police, and the Capitol Police, one of their like legal counsel, were like following me around on the tour, and they were like taking pictures of me and whatnot. But I don't know, I had a good time, especially in retrospect, and really it was important because I did pick up a couple things that I would have used in trial had we gone there. But yeah, the first ever court-ordered tour of the U.S. Capitol, and just another kind of weird facet of my case, you know.
Lots of unusual things about your case, and yet it's such a winning case too. And I love the way you used novel legal theories and just gave these prosecutors headaches the whole time.
Yeah, and one theory I'd like to point out, and the judge didn't like me entertaining. He wanted to like keep it to the facts of my case, but one thing the government did is they wanted to make every defendant guilty of what the entire crowd had done, right? And they called it the raindrop theory because one judge had come down with a saying that like every drop of rain contributes to a field flooding, and they compare that to each defendant who was at the Capitol, right? And saying everybody was equally guilty, which in America you shouldn't be guilty for what the crowd did. It should be whatever you as an individual did. You should be judged on that conduct. But at one point I filed a raindrop theory defense motion, which pointed out that, hey, you know, there were these undercover police who were in the crowd as well. So they were raindrops, and there were undercover FBI in the crowd, and they were raindrops. And then, you know, there's some DOD connections in there too. So, you know, I tried to use their theory and turn it back on them. And, yeah, I mean, that's just one example, but I think there was an egregious attempt to make it about what the crowd had done rather than what the individual had done. Mm-hmm. And I had to push back on that because there were a lot of things going on that day. It was a complex environment, and yeah, things were unfolding very quickly. Like, your perspective on TV is one perspective, but every individual there had a different perspective. And I'll probably touch on that when I do my dissertation. But yeah, everybody had a different perspective. They're bringing a different background with them and kind of digesting different information. And so they can only react as quickly as they can based on what information and experience that they're bringing to that.
You know, Will, as we go to wrap it up here, I want to do this for another 3 hours, but I don't think I can. Let's talk a little bit about the wider human impact. I mean, there were hundreds mm-hmm. of peoples whose lives were affected, families were affected, people who have lost their homes, who have lost custody of children, people who in desperation took their own lives. Yeah. I mean, I think it's easy for a lot of people to say, hey, our guy won the election and our guy's in the White House now and all is well. All is not well. I mean, the worst of it, like we don't have the guy standing there sticking the spear in us anymore, but the wounds still remain. And
yeah, and obviously the people who ended up taking their own lives just because of the great pressure that was brought down on them, obviously that is huge. I'm good friends with Jerry Perna. Her nephew had been there at the Capitol, and he had been kind of forced into the plea deal to that obstruction charge. And then the government came along and said, oh, we're going to add a terrorism enhancement to your plea deal, which would have raised like the time that he would have had to spend in prison, added a few years to it. And he despaired at that point, and he took his life. And that didn't just affect him being gone, like his entire family's affected. And I've chatted with Jerry many times. I've met her brother, and various members of her family, and like they are still mourning him being gone. Or Jordan Meacham, a 22-year-old from Utah, charged with 4 misdemeanors for walking into the Capitol. He'd never faced anything like that before. He'd lived a, relatively perfect life out there, and he despaired, and he took his own life. And psychologically going through it, that was one of the big battles. Like, we had to maintain hope going through it. And I tried to encourage people along the way and like, hang on, persevere regardless of what happens. You got to keep going. Never give up. But it was very difficult psychologically and also physically. Like, a lot of people lost jobs. A lot of people, they couldn't make their mortgage payment. We have a defendant from the Kansas City area. They had to sell their house because they couldn't make the mortgage payment. And they ended up losing money on it. You have people who've now gotten divorced or lost custody of children because of what happened that day. And, a lot of people are struggling to find jobs, people who are overqualified. I know people who have graduate degrees. I've got multiple master's degrees. I'm in a PhD program. And yet, even now, it can be tough to get a response to an application, for a job. But like, I have confidence that I will rebuild, but it'll probably be a little bit harder for everybody forever because of that. And I don't know, we have to chart our own way out of it. Unfortunately, we're not getting maybe as much support from the government as we would like. Like, I was a supporter of President Trump. I continue to be. But we need the truth of what happened that day, the truth of what the government did that day. We know there were agencies involved. We know the National Guard didn't get deployed like when they should have been. And there were people in the Pentagon who were kind of holding up the deployment of that. We'd like answers, like, why did all that happen? And part of the defamation has been the lies that they've told for 4 years continue to persist. And until you get the truth of what happened, people aren't going to see the other side of that. Even though, like, I've dug into the details enough to where I know, like, the average person isn't going to see that unless the government comes clean on what happens. So, yeah, the human toll is huge. And there are people who, they've gone into debt and they're still struggling, and they need help, and they're just fighting to keep their head afloat right now. But yeah, and the psychological ones. A lot of kids are struggling with the fact that their home got raided and a SWAT team were pointing rifles at their dad and them and their mom. And even now, like, they see like police lights in their neighborhood and they freak out because of that. Like, they're forever kind of, scarred because law enforcement was used in a way that it shouldn't have been used. So, the total human toll will be immeasurable, but a lot.
Yeah, it's so much wrong was done, and I'm so grateful to you for standing up, for holding firm. I know the weight was indescribable, but you did it. Any as we kind of bring it to a close, you've been through a very real, practical fight for your life. Frankly, I mean, you told me that part of how you got through this was, a fight for your life in Yellowstone during a rafting accident in 2015, and that kind of that experience kind of helped gird you for this or prepare you for this. But what would you say, just from your personal experience here, to encourage other people who are facing trials, facing false accusations? What would you say to them to encourage them to stand firm and to not take the easy plea out, but to continue making it hard for the false accuser to stay in the fight?
Yeah, well, you never know how you're going to respond to a situation like that until you go through it. And these situations are so crazy, you never want to intentionally go through it. But like, I nearly died from a kayaking accident in Yellowstone. Like I said, I was in cold water for 3.5 hours, severe hypothermia. I was in water long enough to die 3 times over, right? I had impossible odds then, and yet I eventually made it to shore. And so that experience of surviving the impossible let me know that it could be possible to survive the January 6th situation, which was impossible at the time. And I had to have faith even when it looked like I wouldn't get through it. I guess one thing, like you never know how you're going to respond until you get to that adversity, but you got to stay calm. You've got to, look for opportunities. You've got to believe, trust God. But you also, I don't know, you have to have grit. You have to have a mentality that you're going to persevere and overcome the most difficult situation you've been on, regardless of how bad it gets. Like when your life is imploding day after day after day, or whatever you're going through, you have to persevere no matter what happens. Never give up. And I think of the prophet Samson from Judges, and in many ways we look at him as kind of maybe not the best example from the Bible, and yet God chose him for a specific reason in that specific time. And, Samson, he lost his strength, right? Delilah cut the hair off, and then the Philistines captured him. And the Philistines were bragging, our gods have delivered Samson into our hands. And yet, it was actually the opposite. Like Samson wasn't locked up with them. They were locked up with Samson. And when they brought him off to show all their people, he pushed the pillars down, and God had put him in that situation for that very reason. So you have to have a mentality that I'm among the enemy, and I'm willing to sacrifice myself to achieve whatever God has in mind for me. And you may not always get out of it, but if you have that mentality that you're willing to sacrifice, you'll probably do better work, and maybe the impossible will happen. Maybe you'll actually get out of it. But you never know until you'll be there, and hopefully most people will never get in those situations, but have the mentality that you're going to keep fighting no matter what happened, and if people try to give you trouble, make it more trouble for them.
Love it, man.
Love
it. Well, thanks so much for your friendship, for your stand, for coming on and sharing the story, man, and for letting me back into your life.
Yeah.
I'm grateful to know you. I'm grateful to have the chance to watch you. And man, I cannot wait to read that dissertation and that book.
It'll be a wild one, yeah.
If you need anyone to look at chapters ahead of time, I'm eager. I am eager, my friend. Good deal. Well, thanks so much for coming out here. I've enjoyed this.
Yeah, appreciate it, Chase.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Will and I are coming to you from Smithville, Missouri at the Herzog Foundation Studios. The Herzog Foundation is an awesome, awesome group that helps to catalyze Christian education and to bring you brave voices. Check them out at herzogfoundation.com. If you'd like to know more about me and my other work, you can head on over to chasespears.com. And if this podcast has helped to encourage you, I'd love to hear about it. Reach out to me on my website. I'd love to hear your story. You can contact me through there. Here on this podcast, we try to bring you stories of courage from the men and women who have lived it, who are walking through it, to show you it can be done. But it's up to you to find your own spine and to put these principles into action in your own lives. I'm Chase Spears. Thanks for listening.
Remember to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode, and we'll see you next time on Finding Your Spine.